All right, and welcome everyone. My guest today is Mike Capuzzi. Mike has been working with clients since 1998, and over the past 2 decades, he's helped thousands of business owners around the world create better marketing. In 2019, Mike launched Bite-Sized Books. Now, this is a publishing venture founded on his proven formula for creating short, helpful books. He calls them shooks. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And these are for Main Street business owners. Shooks are ideal for business owners who want to increase their level of authority and sell smarter by providing helpful information in easy to read, short, helpful books. So Mike published Main Street Author, which shows how to author, publish, and leverage a shook for your business. So Mike, welcome to A Revolution of Interdependence. Now, this podcast is all about how we help each other succeed. So we're going to start with the one question that drives us. I want you to tell me about some person or group who made a difference in your life. This is someone or some group that you can't imagine being where you are in your life without them.
Yeah, and I appreciate that question, Will, because for me, it was a very simple answer. It literally, one of those things just popped. I didn't have to ponder it too long. So as you mentioned, I started my business, my consulting business in 1998. And for a number of years, I was able to ride the coattails of some relationships I had built when I was in corporate America. But things changed. The dot-com bubble burst. This was late 90s, early 2000s. And I sort of found myself wondering what's next or who, I just didn't feel complete, like I was doing the right thing at the time. And I actually read a book. I'm a voracious book reader by a gentleman who's I have come to know now. His name's Dan Kennedy. And Dan is a world-renowned marketing strategist. He's written a ton of books. He's not everyone's cup of tea, but he calls himself the professor of harsh reality. And I learned a lot from his books, but I learned so much, and I was just so intrigued by his style of marketing that I reached out to him, and long story short, created a relationship, did work with him over the years. And, he had a group, a membership program that numbered in the thousands of business owners that I soon came to become very well known in, because he, I stood on his shoulders, if you will, standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
And he just, that relationship just catapulted my business, my recognition throughout the world. And it would be Dan Kennedy.
That is fantastic. That's great. So now let's jump into your work. You published Main Street Author. I had a chance to read through it. Really fabulous stuff. Let's start just with a definition. Tell me, what is a Main Street author?
Yeah, so again, my background for the last almost 16, 17 years has been smaller, more medium-sized businesses. And a good chunk of them, Will, not all of them, but a good chunk I define as a Main Street author. So these are your dentists, your lawyers, your insurance agents, your physicians, the traditional local business, who I typically say, well, they want to be 5 Mile famous, right? They don't need to be like you and me that might have a global audience. They just want to be known as a respectable, authentic dentist in their town, for example. So that's how I define, what I mean by a Main Street author is someone who runs or owns a Main Street type business, but leverages the power of writing a book, a real book, to help their audience. Now, I will also say we do work with corporate CEOs and such. We're actually starting to expand our brand a little bit, but yeah, the concept of Main Street author, I thought really signified local business owner turned author.
Yeah. Why do you have such a heart for him? Because clearly you do. Like, I hear you talking about him. You're like, yeah, that's my tribe. These are my people. Tell me why you have such a heart for the Main Street author.
That's a good question too. And that I never thought about, but I think the instant answer that pops into my head, I mean, I know a lot of them, so I just like them. I ran an in-person group where we would get together once a month. It was before Meetup, but I would have local business owners. We'd get 50, 60, 100 people to come in each month, all again, typically Main Street authors. But I think the answer to your question really comes down to my grandfather on my mom's side was a pharmacist, and his dad was a pharmacist in a little place up in northeastern Pennsylvania. And I can remember spending summers in the pharmacy, and it was an independent pharmacy. And I just, he never became rich, but he obviously helped a lot of people. He and my grandmother who worked in the business. And I just have the best memories, besides stealing a lot of candy from the pharmacy.
Of course,
candy,
good.
get a candy thing.
Right
But,
on.
I just had the best memories. And I think my grandfather, and it was my grandmother who really taught me about the love of books. So yeah, it was probably my grandfather had, just seeing him struggle, but also run a day-to-day business on Main Street.
That's beautiful. Yeah, the pharmacy. I know my daughter worked in a pharmacy in Salem, Virginia, and just it was this. It's still, there's these places still where they're the center of town. Those Main Street businesses, they're disappearing, but
oh yeah,
that's really great. So okay, so you come along and you have a formula for helping them write a shook. So talk to me, like what's a shook and how is it different than a book? Yeah, help us understand that.
A shook stands for short, helpful book. So a couple, right. I'm a marketing guy at heart, right? So one sort of teachable moment for people who'd have to market a business or a product or service, you always want to be, you try to want to be different and unique, right? It's right. Important. So I mean, a book, everyone knows there's book writing and book publishing services and yada, yada, yada. I came up with something new. I call it a shook. For most people like it. Some people get annoyed by it. But, it was my way of just signifying, just like there's the Big Mac and the Whopper, there's a book and there's a shook. A shook is a short, meant to be read in about an hour. So it's a real book, nonfiction book that's focused on helping, I call it helping before selling. So it's meant to provide, for a dentist, how to have teeth for life. And then it's her best tips. But it provides helpful information, Will, but it also instructs or encourages readers that get what the book is all about to take what I call the next step, which is part of the formula, which is to reach out to the author and hopefully engage his or her business.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really good. And why? Why should they think about publishing a book? Why should a business owner become publishing a book? Like, what are some benefits? If you're marketing your own stuff, like what are the top maybe 2 or 3 benefits you would say that a business owner would get from becoming a shook author?
Well, again, good question, because, in my opinion, and I do have a podcast. It was called the Main Street Author Podcast. We're in the middle of rebranding it to the Author Factor to make it a little bit wider, but this concept of what it means to be an author, it's the Author Factor.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, the answer is the Author Factor. So what does that mean? Well, even in this day and age, Will, and I know as a PhD, you can appreciate this because I'm sure you've read a few books in your day. Books are still a respectable, appreciated way of getting information, right? So yes, there's blogs, there's videos, there's all this stuff out there in the digital world now. But, more often than not, when you really need to learn something or know something, you reach out for a book. Now, yes, there's digital books, but I still like the traditional book. I can hold and put a bookmark in. But so I think first of all, it's a great way of creating a conversation. I always say books are conversation starters. Obviously, the person who's reading it is interested in that topic. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reading it. So it's a conversation starter. It allows the author to focus and have a focused conversation. In this day and age, Will, if you've written a book, so if there's Dentist 1 and Dentist 2, for example, and Dentist 1 is, putting out the happy smiley face type stuff, advertising, and then Dentist 2 is saying, listen, you can have a happy face, but I've also written a book on how to do it. There's a level of authority that is very real. The word authority starts with author, right?
Sure.
So that's a cliche, but it's true. And then the third point I'd say, Will, is it just offers the business owner who decides to become an author a really unique competitive advantage, a unique distinction point. Most people don't write books. A lot of people want to write a book. Most don't. And I think by the very fact that someone has, it really sets them in a different, and in my opinion, positive light.
That's really good. That's really good. One of the things that we talk about on this podcast, because we're trying to figure out how we help each other, is how we help people transition to places that they hadn't been or couldn't imagine they can be. So I'm just wondering if you can just tell me some stories of of authors who transition. Tell me some stories of authors who maybe found a voice or came to a new place. Like what does the transformation look like for these authors?
Well, in a lot of cases, Will, it's as you think about it, for a lot of people, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's profound. I was just mentioning to you before we hit the record button, I just interviewed a gentleman on my podcast last night. I had to do it at night because he was, of all places, he was in Tasmania.
Yeah.
And he had, on my podcast, I only interview authors. So he had just written his first book. It took him 7 years. It was a very, our clients can do it in a matter of weeks, but it took him a long time. And it was a very traditional, several hundred pages. But unbeknownst to him, it became an award-winning book in Australia, like a real award, right? It just opened up all these new doors for his consulting business. And that's just in the matter of a year. And we hear stories like that over and over again. My daughter, Will, when she was going into her senior year of high school, so it was a couple years ago, she and I were talking, and she's like, it was in the middle of the summer going into her senior year. And I was trying to encourage her to think about, after high school, what school, college, and how she can leave an impact and be different. Well, we came up with the idea for her to publish a book. I think I was more excited than she was, but that was in July. It was July 4th weekend, 2018. And by Labor Day, just 12 weeks later, whatever it was, 8 weeks later, we had gone to print with a book. It was about dog rescues. We had just rescued our first dog. She loves animals. She was working in a veterinarian's office as a summer job. And she was the author of the idea of the book, but it was a compilation book, Will. So we got 26 people who rescued a dog to contribute a chapter. She raised like $6,000 from this book because we were donating all the money to the dog rescues in the book. She was featured in local magazines, front page articles in our local newspaper.
Yeah.
And it made, I think in 10 years from now, she'll appreciate it more. But I don't think she realized what that did for her. When it came time for college applications, she used it. She got handwritten letters back from the deans of schools of journalism that she was applying to, saying this was amazing. So there's just something special, Will, when you just take the time, energy, and effort to put the gift that you have for the world and put it in a book format.
Wow, that's really, really powerful. Because oftentimes, people recognize they've got a voice, they think they have a voice. They think they have something to say, but they're not quite sure how to say it. So I'm wondering, how do you work with your people? Because as a person who's published a couple of books, but not for a while, and struggled with the author process, it's hard, man, and it's lonely, and sometimes you're just staring at a blank screen. How do you help people? How do you help your Main Street authors get from, I have an idea, I'm an authority on something, to, hey, here's my book? What's that process look like?
Yeah, again, I love the question because it's important. So there's an important distinction here. The kind of books, and for example, here's one of my shooks. So it's a real book, right? It's up on a bookshelf. You see some behind me. And I say that because I'm not trying to be a New York Times bestseller. I am not trying to be the next Hemingway. Obviously, you can just tell the way I speak. I am who I am, right? I'm not trying to be anything than what I'm not, what I am, someone I'm not. So a lot of folks, when they start, think, I'm not smart enough. I'm not a good enough writer, and I get that. My degree from college is engineering, so I'm very analytical. I know what it's like to get in your own way. And I encourage them, and this is very important, Will, in my opinion. If that book never gets written, it's never going to help anybody. And without a doubt, books help people. You may not know it. They may not leave an Amazon review. They may not, you may never meet the people that you help, but they will help people if they're written with integrity and all that.
Sure.
So I think I always encourage them to try to put the spotlight, get it off of you. And your lack of time, your lack of this, that, or the other thing. Write like you talk. This is a conversation between you and the reader in book format. But take the spotlight off of you and put it on your intended reader and how you can help them. And the fact that if you don't write it, you're never going to help them. And I really try to get them to think about the reader and their need and desire for that information.
Yeah. Do your authors make money off of their shooks?
So again, I love it. You've done your research, so great. Our intention with a shook, Will, is not to quote sell it. Matter of fact, I wrote a shook called The Magic of Free Books, right? There is a very powerful marketing strategy that's been around for over 100 years, which is essentially giving away your book. Now, you don't give it away to everybody. You give it away to, ideal target readers,
Qualified leads.
customers, clients.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Listen, my shooks are on Amazon. Yeah, I make some money. It's nothing. It might be some nice dinners out every couple, month or whatever. But the strategy with a shook, Will, is that it connects you and your products or services to the reader, and that's where you make your money with a shook. You're trying to find, like, as soon as we're done this podcast interview, I actually have what I call a strategy session with someone who read my book on Amazon, and he wants to learn more about shooks. So that's how we make money.
That's exciting. Yeah. So it's, I've heard the phrase digital calling, or a calling card, like your book as a calling card, things like that. That's really encouraging. That's very exciting. So
it's fun stuff.
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
No, it's fun stuff. And yeah, we call them business cards on steroids. They're a lot more than that, but that's what they are.
No, I love that, because I know even in the work that I do, and as I meet people, sort of quickly summarizing who you are and what your contribution in the world is, that can be daunting. Like coming up with a short bio or your LinkedIn, about me, or same thing for your personal website. That could be really daunting. A book, it gives you the opportunity to really sort of establish some credibility. So I love that idea. Really powerful.
Well, and someone like yourself, and I appreciate it because I'm sure your listeners will pick up on it. But I noticed with your podcast, you share a lot of stories. You're a storyteller, I can tell. And
absolutely,
there's a whole, the power of storytelling is very real. And what better way to share stories than in a book?
Yeah. So what's the special sauce? Like what's your Big Mac sauce for shooks? Why do shooks seem to work when some of these other processes don't?
Well, it goes back to when you were asking, who had a profound effect on me, Dan Kennedy. So Dan Kennedy is a marketing guy. He's a direct marketing guy. So I don't know how much you know about direct marketing, but direct marketing. So years ago, I was in corporate America. We did kind of what I call, I have to position against it. So we did what I call big dumb marketing, BDM, right? So branding, but they had huge business. They had the wherewithal. A lot of business owners don't have that wherewithal. So their marketing really has to work. Direct marketing, direct response marketing is a way for a very, all your marketing is tied to results, Will. So it's about marketing that you can track and generate a response. So what makes really the special sauce of a shook is they are direct response books. If you don't mind, I know not everyone's going to be able to see this, but if you're on YouTube, you'll see, and there's just one example of a shook, right?
Yeah.
But throughout the book, I offer ways. Now, this is sold on Amazon. Amazon doesn't tell me who my customers are, right? But the only way I can find out who's reading my book on Amazon is to get them. So I make an offer in the book. Go get my next book for free. And now I can build an email list. I can create a relationship with someone I wouldn't know otherwise. So that direct response mechanism in a book, which when I talk about it, to me, it's sort of like, duh. But so many business owners, so many business-oriented authors make that mistake. They never give readers who want more from you the pathway to get more. They just say, hey, leave an Amazon review and that's it. But what if I want more? Will, what do I want? If I want more from you, what are you offering me, the reader, to create that, continued relationship?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So let's say somebody's listening to Revolution of Interdependence. They're like, oh yeah, I want to be a Main Street author. I want to enter into the process. What does the process look like? Like, walk us through the steps of creating one of these books?
Yeah, so on average, it's about an 8 to 12 week process. Whereas a traditional business book, Will, is 50, 75, 100,000 words. A shook is anywhere from about 10 to 12,000. Again, it's a real book.
Right.
I have Kindle versions, I have audio versions,
Right.
obviously paperback versions. It's just designed to be quickly read. It's not designed to be the A to Z story about what you do. It's designed to be focused on a specific part of it, maybe, or an overview. But it's about an 8 to 12 week process. I mentioned I was an engineering major, and I did engineering for a number of years out of college.
Right.
So I've built a system, a program, if you will, that literally walks someone from idea to printed book. It's a lot of coaching. I know you're a coach. So I work directly with every one of our clients. We do Zooms like this. I'm asking them a lot of questions, uncovering. And at the end, a pretty darn good book is created. And more importantly, a book that's going to help people. So it's our authors I do always encourage, by the way, our authors, our clients to write their own content. We do offer ghostwriting, but I always think, Will, nobody's going to be as passionate about your topic than you are. And yes, a ghostwriter might be able to get that, but that's why a last cliche I'll share is I always say, strive for personality, not perfection. This is not about creating the perfect book. There's no such thing. Create a book that's going to create a relationship with your readers.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that, because that's what we're all trying to do. I mean, we're in the middle of this explosion of enabling technologies that let us all have these conversations. I remember there was a book in the late 90s called The Clue Train Manifesto. And it was basically, it was 4 authors. I can't remember their names right now, but basically saying, hey, corporate America, hey, big, this sort of like the big keepers of the conversations. We're having our own conversations now. We don't need you anymore. And so, well, like, while I recognize your distinction you're making between quote unquote real books or something like that, it's a conversation. This is a conversation, this podcast, our blogs and, the YouTube channels and all that. These are conversations. Some of them are better conversations than others, let's face it. But I love that you're enabling people to have a voice, talk about their passion for what they do, for the people they do it for. Yeah, I just absolutely love that, man. This is really good stuff. So if people don't remember anything else we talked about, they're like, oh yeah, self-publishing book, but what's the one thing that you want them to be like, look, do not forget this thing? What's the thing they should walk away with no matter what?
Well, I'm going to go back to something I heard on your podcast, and I wrote it down. So this is real, and I'm looking at it on my screen. You mentioned one of your reasons for creating this podcast was to build cycles of service that benefit us in the world. And I heard that, I was like, whoa, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm encouraging my clients to do. It comes through a book, a short, helpful book, but it ties into your podcast mantra, one of your mantras for your podcast. So I would say, well, if someone's listening and they either have a personal story that just is something like a passion project, something they just need to get out and share with the world, or if they're an expert at something that they do, there's all kinds of different types of books that should be brought out to the world. I would say just, again, okay, so here's my last cliche, just do it. Again, if it doesn't get done, it's not going to help somebody. And like you said, the technologies are simpler these days. There's people like me that can help you. It doesn't have to take 7 years to write a book. And I would say just do it.
That's beautiful. So I know you're going to offer the listeners some gifts, but before we get there, where can people find you? What's the best way to connect to you? Obviously Amazon, but how else can they find you in this World Wide Web that we live in?
Well, MikeCapuzzi.com. So
Nice.
That's my main domain. There's 15 years of content up there. Our publishing company, Bite-Sized with the D, bitesizedbooks.com. You can learn more. Our program details are right there. We don't hide anything. I put it right out there. If this looks like something you want to do, let's have a call. If not, that's okay too. And then, like I said, we just rebranded our podcast. It's the Author Factor podcast at authorfactor.com. So I appreciate you allowing me to share that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And they can find it on all the main platforms, Spotify, Apple, and all that. That's great. So I know you wanted to give a gift some a gift to our listeners, how can listeners get that?
Well, if they're intrigued by what I had to share today, Will, I wrote a book called The 100-Page Book. It's a shook.
Right.
So, and guess what? It's 100 pages.
Love it. I love it.
And we've sold thousands. So, I didn't set out to sell thousands, but it just took off almost 2 years ago. It's a neat little book. It lays out literally step by step, Will. So someone can take it. People have. Matter of fact, I just interviewed a lawyer, an estate lawyer, who read my book. I didn't know him, but I found out he wrote a shook because someone else told me he wrote it, and he just took this book and wrote a shook, which he's now using. So I want to give a digital copy away, the most recent version. It's a digital version you can read on your phone or computer. And I also put a little blueprint book. Again, it distills down even more, literally the step-by-step process. So it's 2 little books that you can read online. And if they go to mikecapuzzi.com, it's a hidden page, mikecapuzzi.com/gifts, GIFTS, plural. Just let me know, I just need you name your name and email, and let me know you heard it on Will's podcast, and we'll send you the, and I don't bombard people with emails, Will. I'm past that in my career. We'll let them know about some things that we do from time to time, but it's a great way to get some good stuff right away for your listeners.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks for the gift of your presence. Thanks for what you're doing to make the world a little bit better and to help other people succeed. That is exactly what the stories I love to tell. And so I got to help you tell that today, which I'm super jazzed about. So thank you, Mike. This was great.
Hey, well, I appreciate it. Good luck and congratulations on the podcast.
All right. Thanks much.